Hi guys, today I'm just running through the research practices evaluation that I'm going to be asking you to write. So the research project evaluation is actually a lot longer than the research practices one. The research project evaluation is 150 words for a summary and then up to 1500 words for the evaluation. It's marked against 3 different performance standards, which is the evaluation of the processes used, the evaluation of the challenges and opportunities that were extended to you, and also the evaluation of the outcome. It's also marked against the Synthesis 3 performance standard, which talks about the language that you use. Right, so what I'm going to do is run through the evaluation for the research practices. This is a really good place for you to start off with your research project one at the end of the year. However, it doesn't provide enough information for you to be able to get a really good grade for it. When it comes to that section of the research project, I'll make another one of these that specifically goes back through the different things that you're going to be asked to have a look at. Alright, so what I'm going to have a look at first of all, this Word document that I've made up, is basically, I've emailed it out to you so that you can have it while you're writing it, but what we'll do is we'll just run through the different sections of it. So first of all, what you need to realise is that the purpose of the research project and research practices evaluation is to tell someone what you did and why you did it. It's also to show that you understand that the different processes that you use during a research project or a research task is different to what you've experienced before, that sometimes you run into problems and sometimes you don't, and that depending on the different processes that you use, it determines the type of problems that you run into. So basically the purpose is to look at specifically your question and how the processes you use for your question were effective against your question. Alright, so first of all, what I'm going to ask you to do is write a summary. The summary should only be like a paragraph long, maybe 50 words. It actually answers just 3 very simple questions. What was your question? Right, my question was how to build a car. What did you use to do your research? In order to complete my research, I looked at a manual for my car. I also interviewed my grandfather and I searched blogs for car makers. That is the different types of sources that you used. And then how effective was your answer is something like, I was able to answer most of my key findings. These were answered using evidence that I found using my sources, which means that I was pretty effective in answering my question. So the second part of your research practices evaluation I'm going to be asking you to do is the evaluation of the processes used. In this section, I want you to evaluate, in particular, one of your surveys, and in particular, I want you to pick another process that you used and evaluate that. This asks for the processes. Remember, process is a doing word. It's an adjective. No, it's not. That's a describing word. It's a doing word, which is a verb. Therefore, you need to look at the doing part of the source. It's not, I found websites. That's really not a process. I analysed medical journals in order to be able to determine the answer to my question. That's a process, right? So the evaluation of the processes used, one of them is going to be evaluation of the process of conducting surveys. So what I need you to write first of all is the process that you're talking about. So what was one process that you used? The first process that I used was conducting surveys. The specific example of this. So I conducted surveys which asked people who were in Year 11 from Kadena Memorial School to answer a series of questions on the Kardashians. That is your specific example. How credible was this example that you've just given me is the next section you need to cover. So what you need to say is, my surveys were highly credible because they matched the audience that I was asking the question about. So if you're researching something like how the Kardashians influence 16-year-old females in rural South Australia, if you're asking someone to complete a survey who's a 16-year-old girl in rural South Australia, that's a highly credible source. You need to explain why that's highly credible. The next thing that you're actually asking, or I'm asking you to cover, is the reliability of the source. So that is the information that you've been presented with. So how accurate is the information that you've been given through that type of source? So if you found through your surveys people weren't really giving you information that was useful or weren't giving you information that made any sense, that is less reliable. You may have asked really great people to complete your surveys, but they may have just been mucking around, so they gave you crap information. Make sure you say that. All right. The next thing, F, is actually we go E first. E, then F. E is was this process the most effective in finding the answer to your question? In most cases, surveys will not be the most effective unless you're particularly asking for opinion that people can give you. Tell me this was not the most effective process that I used. However, I was able to find some sources or some information. This was not effective because the information was not reliable, and therefore I couldn't find it elsewhere to cross-reference with. That's a fine argument. That's a fine example of why it wouldn't be useful. F is, was this process fit for purpose? Remember, fit for purpose is a process that matches your question. So if you're researching something on netball and how to warm up for netball, actually doing the warm up yourself is fit for purpose because you're doing what you've been told is a good idea. If you are just searching websites, is that really specific to your question? Is that really fit for purpose? If you are interviewing someone about netball and you're asking your uncle, who is a coach of the Thunderbirds, that makes sense. But if you're asking your uncle who's the coach of the Kadina Footy Club, probably not that fit for purpose, all right? So that's the kind of thing that you need to talk about under F. And last thing that I'm asking you to do is, what did you find out about using this type of source? Is it really hard to be able to do some parts of it? Is it really easy? Is it something that you'll use in the future? What was the most difficult thing? What was the easiest thing for you to be able to do with this type of source? All right. So in total, you need to do 2 paragraphs. So you need to provide an explanation for 2 different processes that you use. Maximum of 250 words for both of those paragraphs. They don't have to be sexy paragraphs. They just have to follow A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right. That's all I'm asking you to do in this one. Evaluation of decisions made in relation to challenges that you were presented with. So in this section, again, I wanted you to talk about your surveys because surveys were really challenging to most people, being able to create questions that would give you information that you hadn't found elsewhere or that was in some way insightful, and also trying to choose a audience that would be able to respond to your questions was really helpful. It was really difficult for some people. So what I want you to talk about in your survey section, I don't care if people answered them or not. I don't care if it's you couldn't access SurveyMonkey. Those are first world problems. It's not about printing stuff. It's not about collecting stuff. I don't care about that. What I care about is the process of surveys and how difficult they were for you to be able to do. So first of all, I want you to say one issue, challenge that producing surveys had for you. So, or you had for producing surveys. So one of the most difficult things that I found was asking open-ended questions which people were able to respond to. Fine. What did you do to get around this problem? In order to be able to structure questions that made sense to a wide range of people, I drafted my surveys. I asked other people what they interpreted it as and checked to see it was actually what I was asking people to do. All right. Why did you do this? I did this in order to make sure that the answers that I was receiving were credible and reliable, and that they were able to be easily completed by a range of people. How effective was your decision is part C of this. So how effective was it? Through making this decision related to the challenge, it meant that my survey was clearer for the audience to be able to understand, which meant that I got a wider range of responses and therefore were more successful in being able to incorporate that into my outcome. How do you know it was effective is by lots of people were telling me that they were able to easily answer my questions. I didn't get any feedback about questions being confusing, that kind of thing. And why do you know it was effective? Well, at the end I was able to incorporate the answers into my research outcome and therefore it had to be effective. All right? That is what the evaluation of challenges is asking you for. The evaluation of decisions made in related to opportunities. This is related to one of the processes that wasn't your surveys. It could be any of them. If you managed to interview someone cool, if you managed to find a manual for a 1976 Toyota Hilux, awesome. So that's an opportunity, all right? So what is one of the opportunities that were extended to you? And how did you use that? What decision did you make when you were given that opportunity? I was given this opportunity. I thought, well, why not? If someone's willing to do that for me, I'll give it a go. All right. So that is what your response to the opportunity is and why you did it. How effective was your decision? So how did it help you improve your outcome? How do you know it was effective? I was able to introduce this information into my outcome, which supported my argument. And why do you know it was effective? It provided a more well-rounded argument for my outcome, maybe. So they're the different things that you can talk about in there. So that's A, B, C, D, and E. All right. The last part that I need you to write about is the evaluation of your outcome. The first thing I want you to say is, I answered my question, or I did not answer my question. I answered part of my question. I answered 3 of my 4 key findings. Say how much of your question you answered, and then explain why. Is your outcome credible? Are you a credible source? Are you the expert here? Is your outcome reliable? Does it have information that makes sense and is cross-referenceable with other things? Have you included a bibliography? Have you included citations using footnotes? If you've done that, then it's more reliable. Is it biased? Does it only show one side of an argument? Does it only show you one way how to do something? Does it only discuss one idea? If it's biased, say it is biased. It's okay to say it's biased. If you only relied on one source, that's biased. All right. The last thing that you need to say is, who would find your outcome useful? Who's the audience that you directed it at? If it's your grandma and she'd think it was interesting that you have researched pumpkin scones, great. That's useful for her. If it is you looking at ways to improve, like, the feeling of injections, who would find that useful? If you're looking at how, like, obesity has spread in the local area, who would find that useful? It doesn't have to add to any of the current research, but some people might find it interesting. Identify those people, but also acknowledge that perhaps it isn't the most well-rounded piece of research. All right, so that one's only 100 words in that little section there. If you add all of those paragraphs together that I've given you the word counts on, it gets to about 600. That gives you 100 to play with. Just make sure after you've made a statement each time you must explain why you did something, why you made that decision, why you think that is the case, why is something biased, why is something reliable, why is something credible. If you send me a draft, I'll have a look at it and I'll give you some feedback, and that's about it. Cool.